So, the translation's out for My Hero Academia manga chapter 365, and let's just say that in this video, I just want to discuss a little bit more about what's going on with Shigaraki Tomura and the implications that this chapter may bring for what is going on with his body, creation, mutation, just growth. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but first, right after this. Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Man Drew, and I'm here to do my discussion for My Hero Academia manga chapter 365. And pretty much in this video, we're just going to be going over a few things that I missed in the chapter, going over a little bit more about the characters that are going on in this chapter, talk about some differences between the official and unofficial translations, and then finish it off with talking a little bit more about what's going on with Tomura Shigaraki and sort of making a prediction on what's going to be going on with his character moving forward. So, let's dive right into the differences between the official and unofficial translations. And the first difference that I want to bring up comes from the quality of the scans. And that when it comes to Shonen Jump, I would always advocate looking and reading the official release because they do have most likely better translations for what is being stated in the story, as well as better image quality. And we can see that this better image quality comes in with the official translations because in the first page of this chapter, after the reintroduction of Edshot's Quirk, which, let me just say, slight tangent, y'all need to start reading My Hero Academia a lot more and rereading some of these characters' quirks. Because for some apparent reason, people just did not know what Edshot's quirk was, and they always assumed that it's his ability to fold his body, but never went to actually read what his actual quirk was. It's literally on the wiki. Rant over. But something that I missed because of the unofficial translations and the unofficial scans is that when it comes to Bakugo's heart, you can get a very clear look at how much damage was done to his heart, and once again confirms that Best Jeanist did play a part in helping with Bakugo's heart by actually sewing it back together. And as you can see, the actual damage to his heart is not as significant as people believed. From my perspective and what we saw a few chapters ago, it seemed to be very blatant that a big hole opened up in his heart, but it did not completely destroy it. And as we see, his heart just has, like, relatively speaking, a small hole in comparison to the rest of his body. And how when it comes to Edshot, there is some implications that he does have a fair amount of medical knowledge about turning himself into a suture that is on a surgical level, and the fact that he uses terminology such as cardiopulmonary function really implies that he does have some knowledge of medical and anatomy and physiology when it comes to the human body. But that is something that I missed, and not necessarily something that is different with the chapter. So yeah, that is something that I missed in the unofficial translations, and when it comes to the translations between both of these series, from official to unofficial, the differences are very minute when it comes to the implications that are being stated. For instance, a small implication between the official and unofficial translations just comes from, in the unofficial translations, Shigaraki Tomura brings up this idea that his head is spinning, while in the official translation, he brings up how he's just staggering a little. And one of them implies that he has taken a little bit more damage with his brain being rattled than him just staggering a little. Which shows us that we shouldn't really take the leaks or even the unofficial translations at face value, because there are some implications that can be made that can be rectified with the official translation. But besides that, that's pretty much all of the differences with this chapter and things that I missed. Between both the official and unofficial translations, Mirko as well as Edshot and Shigaraki's dialogue are still relatively the same. And we'll talk a little bit more about Tomura Shigaraki a little bit later, but once again, we do have Mirko and her character is still relatively the same between translations, which I am very happy for. So now, let's dive a little bit more into Tomura Shigaraki in this chapter and what this could entail for the story moving forward. Because there's a few things that we need to talk about with this chapter. One of them involves just the personality of who Shigaraki is at this moment. And then the second one is pretty much what we see at the end of this chapter and what that could mean and how that ties into the Quirk Singularity theory and how Shigaraki's body is adapting. So for starters, when it comes to the translations and even when it comes to the links, the implication in this chapter is that we are seeing more of Tomura Shigaraki and how the phrasing of his words switched less from Boku, which is something that All For One uses, to Watashi, something that Shigaraki Tomura uses more frequently. And pretty much this is implying the idea that what is happening right now is more of Tomura Shigaraki than All For One, but in reality, it's just a mixture of who these two individuals are, the new Shigaraki, a mixture of both All For One's personality and mannerisms, as well as Tomura Shigaraki's personality and mannerisms. And that the mannerisms and the personalities fluctuate in importance or control from panel to panel or chapter to chapter, but they are still relatively mixed together to form this new individual, which is something that I've been constantly saying for the past few chapters about how the individual that we are fighting against in this war is Shigaraki, but is a mixture and a combination of All For One and Tomura, and that the ideals that we are seeing are both Tomura's and All For One's, meaning that Tomura Shigaraki is still here. And what is even more implied in this chapter is that the Tenko inside of All For One is still Tomura Shigaraki as much as it is Tenko, because we see in this chapter that the Tenko that is being surrounded by the hands as he's lamenting the fact that these heroes are trying to save Bakugo, who is broken, but didn't try to save him when he wasn't broken, how he looks very much like how Shigaraki Tomura looked right after he was adopted by All For One and his hair had turned completely white, or that his hair is beginning to turn completely white as a representation of Tomura, which once again solidifies that this is still Tomura, that Tomura still exists inside of this new version of Shigaraki, and that potentially what is going on is that he's about to be broken out, or at least be crucial in stopping as well as saving Tomura Shigaraki in the end. So that's something interesting, and I really want to talk about that more and pretty much clarify what is going on with the new character of Shigaraki being a combination of All For One and Tomura, but that they both still exist inside of him, meaning that Tomura is still a major threat in the series, as we've seen with his personality and his want to destroy coming out more often in this chapter. And speaking of that, let's talk about what is going on at the end of this chapter and what the implications of the literal bodies coming out of Tomura's hands mean. And I think what this is all tying into the idea that this is just his body adapting to the quirks. And that the main theory and idea of why Tomura's body is going through all of these changes is because of the fact that he has all of these quirks inside of him. And as stated in previous chapters, when it comes to the Quirk Singularity theory and what's going on with Tomura Shigaraki's body, his body is beginning to grow in these different ways as much as hairs and nails grow on a regular human body. And that this is the way that his body is able to acclimate with all of these different quirks. And at first it just started out with having multiple fingers coming out of his left or his left arm, his left hand, and that eventually those changes led to mouths, eyes, fingers, and now we're progressing to the point of them being fully fledged bodies. And this can be very interesting because the implication is that we're going to be seeing these individuals being a part of Tomura Shigaraki's body, and potentially these are going to be individuals that are going to be fighting against the heroes. And I think the main idea is that the body is trying to find a way to accumulate and try to deal with all of these quirks, and the best way for the body to do that is to have vessels or bodies that can handle quirks. Because we know for a fact that having a quirk or having multiple quirks in one body really dramatically alters or changes the individual's life, draining their life force. In a way, that means that you can only have one quirk per one body. But what if you have a body that can become multiple individuals and in theory hold multiple quirks because they're feeding off the life force of, relatively speaking, different people? And I think that's what's happening with Tomura's body, with his adaptation, that he's adapting in a way to, create more bodies that have life forces that a single quirk can come and feed upon. And I'm not saying that these individuals are going to have the quirks of his mother, his father, of his grandparents, or the people that ignored him, but they are going to be representations of certain quirks, that one person inside of this representation of a person will be able to use one quirk, but it's going to be different from another person right next to them using a different quirk. So in a way, it's kind of his body growing to the point of cloning himself so that he can have more bodies to be able to handle multiple quirks. Or even more, that he has multiple lives that can hold singular quirks in each one of those lives. Now, this does not mean that if one of the people dies that he loses a quirk, but that it just gives him an accessibility for these quirks to be able to be used in a better and more effective way than them just having to be inside of just one body and potentially ripping it apart. He's pretty much just dispersing the power a little bit more equally. So what does this mean for the future? I think that these are going to be, in a way, used to fight against the heroes and really put them to the test. They're able to fight against Shigaraki because they view him as a villain, but now they're going to have to fight against Shigaraki and these fleshy-like tendrils that look like physical people. And if the quirks in some way are able to manifest their consciousness in there, it could be very detrimental for the heroes to try and take down Shigaraki in this moment, and that this could lead to hesitations and characters potentially dying. So I think that what this is setting up is just more of an understanding of what's going on with Shigaraki's body as it approaches the point of singularity and grows into a way to hold all of these quirks, while acting as a deterrent for the heroes to potentially land devastating blows on Shigaraki in fear of hurting the people inside of him, even though they may or may not actually be conscious of it. So I think this is going to be a very interesting development for the future of My Hero Academia, and I can't wait to see a little bit more of what's going on with TOMURA Shigaraki and the people coming out of his body. And we're probably going to get a little bit more of that next chapter, but I also think that we're eventually going to be cutting over to a different area, especially if Bakugo gets revived within the next chapter or two. We're probably going to see his revival and then cut over to see somewhere else, potentially see Deku, potentially seeing what's going on with Ida and Shoto, or hopefully getting to see what's going on with the other smaller areas that we haven't seen in a while. So yeah, I think I'm approaching the point where I'm a little bit satisfied with what we've seen in this fight so far, and I'm ready to see something new. I'm still enjoying what we're seeing, but I just want to see more of the war outside of what's going on with Bakugo. And that this is something that Horikoshi is learning from when it comes to comparing how we treated the last war. He's doing a lot more focus on a lot more bombastic fights, but we may be spending a little bit too much time, and we need to go and see other areas and see what's going on there, focus on them for a little bit longer, cut somewhere else or cut back here, focus on this a little bit more, cut somewhere else, focus on that for a few more chapters, and then rinse and repeat until all of those fights are concluded and the series finally comes to an end. So yeah, that's all I really have to say for my discussion for this part of the chapter. What do you think? Do you have any ideas of what's going on with the bodies coming out of Shigaraki's flesh? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below. Leave a like on the video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!